Hello, everyone, and welcome to this webinar session. I am joined by the fabulous Alyce from Project Level Up to share with you some amazing insights today because 2026 is just around the corner and having your talent strategy in place. Boy, that will set you up for success in the new year. So we have people joining. Welcome, welcome. We'll have a few more of you join in before we get started. So before we dive into all of the content, let's introduce ourselves. For those of you who don't know, my name is Monique Parker. I help accounting firms work their marketing magic to attract more clients, grow their firm, and most importantly, scale higher fees. And a big part of the growth journey is making sure you have team to support that growth. And so, therefore, we are joined today to by Alyce to share her strategies. And Alyce, I will let you give yourself a little bit of an introduction to our audience about your background and how you help.
Thank you, Mon. Hi, everybody. My name's Alyce. I have been leading talent acquisition for brands for the last 13 years across Australia. A big part of what we do is work with people individually, no matter the size of business or the scale, to determine what their needs are and make sure that we can attract the right person into the team for long-term growth and also retention. So a big difference for the way that we work is we don't just place somebody into a seat. For us, it's about working with you long term on what the retention strategies can look like and how we can ensure that you get the team for the longevity, whether it is locally or elsewhere.
Amazing. Thank you, Alyce. And as you are going to hear in this session, Alyce doesn't hold anything back. There's a reason why she's one of Australia's top recruiters, and it's really because she knows her stuff and she won't hold back with pulling the punches, and giving you the news that may not be easy to hear, but is going to change the game for you. All right, so our agenda is we are going to cover 7 key insights that will really turbocharge your approach to recruitment in the new year. This is going to be suited for those of you who are currently recruiting for a role or perhaps looking to build out your team in the next calendar year. And what we're sharing is going to be applicable for practices, small to medium size, but also firms that are part of larger firm networks. So you might have a number of firms under your umbrella and larger firms as well. So as Alyce mentioned, she actually has a background recruiting for, what's the biggest size business you've recruited for?
It would be a global business. It would be one of the top four
Really?
yes,
Well, we
yeah.
can't say who because we never tell client secrets, but so there's going to be a lot of gold in this. And at the end, we'll be sharing with you how you'll be able to access a talent checklist so you can be completely set up for success in the new year. All right, if you have questions as we go along, please feel free to pop those into the chat or simply say hello as we go. All right, so before we dive in, let's just recap some of these stats related to the talent shortage that we are finding ourselves in the in the accounting industry. So you've all heard this a million times, right? It's been bandied around by every expert. Today, we're going to be sharing some actual solutions that are going to make a difference for you. But I mean, the fact of the matter is, there aren't enough accountants in Australia or New Zealand for that matter. This was pulled from a report from Toa Global, who do offshoring, who we work closely with. They have an offshore strategy, and we help with your onshore talent strategy. But the reality is, like those numbers, this is not a seller's game or a firm's game. This is a candidate's game, right? And as you can see here with this pie chart on the right, 40.57% of firms say that finding and hiring the right talent for their firm is extremely challenging. And of all the firms I talk with, hundreds here across Australia and New Zealand every year, recruitment or keeping team is always up there with one of the top challenges. So this is really, really important. But, what are we going to do about it? We're going to have to take some radical action. And I wanted to share a little bit of an example of things that you may not have considered in terms of when you're looking at very generic and templated advice versus how you can apply that in your situation, because you can see here some salary ranges that were put out in a report recently, and this is for onshore team. And you can look at that and think, okay, no worries, you've got your game plan sorted, but the reality is you've got to be thinking locally. So what's going on in your region, your firm type, your team, before you make your plans. And Alyce, I'm going to ask you to elaborate a little bit on this. I know something you're quite passionate about is helping to align expectations
Yes.
for accounting firms in particular around talent.
It is a really big challenge for everyone across the board. It is a very, very hard market to attract talent, no matter the size of your business, no matter how big your brand is, no matter how great your leadership may be, or even your personal profile. I think that as a whole across Australia, and obviously New Zealand does factor into this as well, we are in a place that we haven't been in before, which is that everyone needs to start being really competitive around how they do attract the right person into the team, which can be done. But I think that as an industry person that's been doing this for a number of years, over a decade, I can share that sometimes the salary ranges that we do get reports on are actually not correct. In what I mean by that is that when you are looking to attract, you can't offer the same salary for somebody coming out of the current role. So if you want to remain competitive, salary obviously always comes into the picture, but there's also other things as well that factor in, given now where we sit post-COVID, even though it didn't shake up the entire, Queensland wasn't as hit as bad, but overall, people's expectations, candidates' expectations going into a role, regardless of the size, needs to factor into their work as well as their home life. So there's a big push, and it has been for a number of years, around flexibility. If that's not on offer, you really can't compete today. And that is a really hard fact. I think that some businesses and firms are still struggling to figure out what their best play could be there. Another part to it too is, what does the future, 12 to 18 months look like for someone stepping into the business? You can't just expect someone to come in and not give them any, career development or advancement or investment in themselves as well.
I love it. Thank you, Alyce. It's such a different landscape recruiting now than it was 10 years ago. But the reality is, it's also a hugely different landscape. We were discussing this before the webinar, just than 1 year ago,
Yes.
right? And all of the things that Alyce just touched on, we're going to be diving into more detail as we go to give you some more insights, because it all makes such a difference when it comes to your strategy. All right, so the very first insight we're going to share around recruitment in particular is for you to have an ideal candidate profile in mind. Now, many of you, particularly if you've already joined any of my marketing webinars, will be familiar with the term ideal client profile, right? It's about taking that same approach and that same lens to considering what type of client you want. Now, you'll all say, but we want the unicorn. We're looking for that special someone. Well, so are 27,000 other accounting firms
There is no
locally.
such thing as a unicorn. Let's just start there.
Yes, although I do like to wear purple, but that's the story for a different day. But if we just give this tangible example, and I've worked recently with a few of the firms that I help with their marketing, just to get them, ready for this process to identify, well, who do they actually need? What is the actual role? What skill set is actually required? Because what happens if you're trying to find one person who can do all the things, then you're basically typically going to be finding a very expensive person to do things that they didn't need to, or you're trying to find someone too junior and expecting them to be able to do too much. So really look at what's required in your firm. And another tip I would say is to really look at what practice management or administration or business management style support outside the strict accounting roles you can separate or segregate out of those roles to also make it easier to find your accounting talent. So consider what roles are really well suited to offshore roles. If you're recruiting locally, do you need someone really senior? And if so, that person's going to come with very different expectations than maybe someone who's more junior and looking for, like Alyce mentioned before, that training and development and support. So You can tailor your recruitment message to this person, your job ads, obviously, all of your roles. And then it's much easier to for someone who, like Alyce, who's in touch with the market every day, to give you a really specific recommendation around then an actual salary range, right? Because it's impossible if you're thinking in very generic terms.
Yes. I think a big part of the benefit of using an industry specialist recruiter is that you actually get the insight around, okay, what is your budget and what can we work with? And then they can provide people that would fit within your requirements. But then they'll also offer you alternatives. So the requirements might look a little bit different in terms of their capabilities, but also the salary range. And then it will allow you to open yourself up to conversations that you wouldn't necessarily even have if you had just posted a job ad and put a salary range and then started interviewing those people. I feel that a lot of learnings and key lessons are done through recruitment processes because sometimes business owners don't know what they don't know, and they also aren't aware of exactly the kind of person they're looking for. And it is hard to articulate that for everybody.
Yes.
So, a big part of what you can actually see and get benefit from is opening yourself up to communication with other candidates that you would have absolutely closed off, whether it was the sight of their CV or something that you've judged them on, which we all do. Everyone is guilty of it. That will then allow you to realize, actually, this might be someone that we would be interested in actually moving into the next process, which potentially wasn't the case if it had have just been a job ad placed and then somebody coming through an application.
Absolutely. And we had a really good example of that recently with one of the firms who's a member of my marketing club that we also assisted with some recruitment in bringing candidates to them that they would never have possibly been open to had they not been through a very collaborative and consultative process. Now, as an outcome, that person is in their team helping to shake up processes, question things in an amazingly refreshing way that they're already seeing benefits and efficiencies from, and they are delighted. But they were struggling, just struggling and struggling to recruit before. So,
And I think a lot of
yeah.
that does come down to, in particular with finance and accounting industry, it is that people stay long term. So
Mm.
typically you're not in a different industry that you'd have movement every 1 to 2 years. This is an industry that stays. And so that's a great benefit. But what that means is the recruitment and the talent attraction and the market has shifted so dramatically during the time of tenure of 5 years, 9 years, whatever it may look like. But in your mind, you're trying to push a like for like back into that role. And that's where the
Mm.
discrepancies can come through. Every business is facing it at the moment. It's not just industry specific. But I think a big key takeaway is that we have to listen to what the candidates are asking for so that we can, sustain longer term and maybe get them through that 5 to 9 to 10 years tenure, which is what we have had in the past.
I love that. That's a really important point that you mentioned is that trying to replace like for like,
Yes,
because it doesn't exist in today's market, and
it does not.
particularly around salaries, but in all other areas as well. That is awesome. So, as some insights that you can put into action as a result of this is to go back into your firm if you've got some roles on the go, actually really review the requirements and look at, do all of these things need to sit under one unicorn, or could they live with certain people or role types in your firm? To craft your ideal candidate profile. So really think about what skills and attributes that candidate would need for that particular role, as opposed to, a wish list that's, 100 points long. And then to prepare a job description. So I know this is something you're very passionate about, Alyce, so I'll
Yes.
let you speak to it.
I think that again, if we fall into the same category of a like for like role, or potentially you're trying to replace somebody that's even been in the business less than 5 years, the reality is the role requirements and the job description potentially will not be the same as they were 5 years ago. Legally, there is a lot going on in PDs, and you want to make sure that you're compliant. But the other part to it too is that typically when somebody has come or stayed in a role for a long time, the person that steps into the business is going to need a bit of opportunity to be able to understand what has been done and then work with the business on potentially moving them into a newer way that potentially can be used with AI or anything else to benefit some role tasks that particularly may have been stuck in the, good old olden days that we've been doing for a very long time.
Absolutely. And on that point, I was speaking with a firm just last week around part of their requirements in hiring now because they are implementing a tech stack changeover, which, as you know, if you're in an accounting firm, has its own world of challenge and intrigue, shall we say. And so that's something they're looking for is an attribute of a candidate who's been, through change or doesn't have to have such a steady accounting background to help drive and champion that in the firm. So, all right. So, insight number two, it's all very well for you to think about who you want as your ideal candidate and have your ideal candidate profile. But just like dating, you can have a wish list as long as you like. But on the flip side, the best candidates are also, they have their own wish list for what they want from a firm or a role. So, it's very likely that maybe your firm ticks a lot of those boxes and has that going on. But how do you communicate that clearly and effectively in market? Bearing in mind that many of you, aren't wordsmiths to start with, so we can help with that. But it's looking at strategically your employee value proposition. This is the value proposition that you're offering to someone to come into your business. And this is just about slightly formalizing the process and the documentation so that it's not trapped inside a partner or director's head inside the firm, or it can have a bit more of a life beyond just whoever's got the remit for bringing someone new in.
This is a big challenge
Yes.
during any process of recruitment. This would probably be the hardest part for a business to actually
Mm.
understand and work through because you either have leaders and owners that have been living it, breathing it, as you said, but then you also have the newer generation coming through wanting to make change. So I
Yes.
think that there is a big change in how people perceive what a job can look like, but
Mm.
also how you market and how you demonstrate your value as a business has changed significantly over the last couple of years. So you really do need to look at things that can be a bit of a change and a big leap of faith for leaders that have been running a business the same way for a long time. We're all guilty of it, even myself and my own. But things like flexibility, and we can come back to this a million times, it is a total non-negotiable for most people in workplaces now. I think the other part to it too is how else can we highlight or promote what we're doing as a business that's not just the normal things that everyone's been doing. So it can be things like, your retreats or something that you do
Mm.
for your wellness for each business, for each employee, sorry. It can be things like looking to what this could present to you over the course of the, partner track, or even if you're
Mm.
smaller than that, maybe leadership opportunities and growth and promotion around development pathways. Even though they may have been something that people have looked to in the past, if there is a smaller firm that doesn't have a clear career track that's been advertised or promoted or spoken about online, it is a really key metric to be able to get somebody, excited by it. Location is obviously key, depending on where you live now. People want a lifestyle that fits in with their home life, understandably,
Mm.
flexibility for families, all of those things now are actually what people are after versus just a salary and your bonuses and commissions or whatever it may look like on top of that.
Yes. And Alyce mentioned something really important, which I think is if you are on this webinar and you're a smaller firm, it's not going to be so inherently obvious to candidates around your progression track or the opportunities available. But on the flip side, if you are a good leader or if you've got a great little firm, you're probably going to be giving that person really interesting exposure to juicy work, client interactions, and also potentially even a faster track to some form of progression,
Yes.
right? So,
Yes.
but if you haven't communicated that or showed that to the world, it's really hard for anyone to leap to that conclusion from the outside. So a little bit later on, we're going to be showing you some examples of some visual ways and visual documents you can do to help bring this to life. But like Alyce said, think outside the square. And a really interesting thing is obviously whatever you offer as salary is coming out of a bucket called payroll. right? But some of these other incentives for your team can come out of other line items of your firm's budget. Now, you're accountants, right? So I don't need to tell you how to suck eggs. You can figure this out. But I'm always surprised about the amount of accountants or partners that have not really thought about this, because obviously payroll has some inherent risk around it. But some of these incentives can really easily be added to teams, to individuals, and investing some money makes a huge difference. And employees or new team members like to know not just that you invest in their development or their, what is that? Is there a budget that you've allocated and set each year? Are you really walking the talk? Like, are there structures and processes in your firm to be able to fulfill on what you say? Because that makes it real. So when people say really airy-fairy generic things like great culture, the first question that is elicited when you read that is, well, what makes it a great culture?
It's
Or why,
culture
right?
means different things to every single person. So culture isn't over blanket, it just won't fit. But
Mm,
it's a really great point that you raise because I even can see during processes that I run or haven't been a part of what I hear of. And a big, big block for most candidates is if you go in for an interview for a first round and the candidate asks you about these potential incentives, career track, and you can't answer it, you've already lost that candidate. They're not going to engage for the second round. So a big part of the communication is also relearning how to talk when you do have someone coming in for the first time, whether it is through somebody or it's an introduction through your own job advertisement. You need to be able to speak to because most people nowadays want to be able to hear that in the first round because the conversation is two ways. It's never just what can you do for me in this firm? It's more about how can we work together to benefit each other.
I love that. And because if you can't answer a question like that, what that tells the candidate is A, you haven't thought about it, and B, that means it doesn't exist unless they push for it.
Yes.
So the first step before communicating this to market is to really think about, well, what does your culture look like in your firm? What is your EVP, even for your current team members? Dial that in because that's what brings the culture really to life and makes it easy. And really brings me to my next point, which Alyce said I shouldn't put this on screen, but I said, accountants have great sense of humor, was that if you don't have a great culture at your firm for whatever reason, it may not be your fault, it may be some circumstances. The first place to start is making it a firm that you want to work at and that your current team want to work at and that will be attractive to new team members, because then it's really easier to market and promote that. But it's very hard work to ask a recruiter or anybody to help you go to market to just and basically just polishing a turd. So, um, and I think that there's many of you have said to me that you see firms or bigger firms out there making promises in market on their ads or on what have you that from behind the scenes aren't true. Well, we're going to talk about a bit later because candidates have wised onto this too. We're going to talk about a little bit later how you can actually demonstrate in a really meaningful way some of these things. So there you go, a little bit of a laugh for the afternoon for you. All right, insight number 3, selling your firm to candidates. So as Alyce mentioned earlier, it's a two-way conversation. It's not like the olden days where you had a job, it was a prize, and then, you got to sit at the top of the mountain and pick and choose who you wanted. Now, it's a bit more of an even playing field, and you really have to sell your firm to candidates. So like we said, they're interviewing you even before you've met.
Yes, they market you first. I know that that can be strange for people to hear nowadays, but they really do. They'll look up your brand, they'll look up your LinkedIn profiles. I know that scares a lot of people that aren't as active, and many, many, many people are guilty of this as well. It does take practice, but simple things that you can do to be able to make yourself a little bit more active online will make a huge difference. And then also the marketing, obviously, Mon, that's your bread and butter, but
Yes.
you need to understand in conversation how you can market your business, your leadership team, the differences, and what it might look like for somebody that you're looking to attract into the role.
Amazing. And we'll show some examples of that on screen in just a moment too. So let's dial back to, we talked about EVP, so your employee value proposition, and crafting an EVP pack, a handy resource and piece of collateral that you can have and use in your firm to go to market yourself, to use in conjunction with the recruiter. And even before that, the process of creating this document should sell it to you, if that makes sense. So the firms that I have helped collate these packs together usually have a newfound sense of pride around their firm and their role just through the process of going through this. Okay, so an EVP or a document that outlines this conveys your firm's vision, some information about your firm. And I don't mean information like it was founded in 1979 by a previous partner who's now been bought out by someone else, etc. Not that type of about us, like something a bit more appealing for a new candidate. Your brand values in your firm, an introduction to your directors of your firm and key team members. So who they work for and the leadership team is a really important consideration, particularly for ambitious candidates, but also just for anyone who wants a great life, right?
Yes, I think number 7, if I can just add, because we've touched on most of these,
Yes.
but how you run your own recruitment process direct, if you are advertising a role and you go through a process and you do a short list and you ask candidates to come in and interview, you will put off a candidate if you're unable to run a smooth process. So you're being judged, you're being scrutinized, you're being looked at. The consensus is however you run your own process is how your internal process will also run. So if things aren't clear or if there's not clarity for them, they're going to assume that that's also how it would look internally, and they won't be interested to continue to move forward in the process. So a big part of this is making sure that every engagement that you have, it puts your brand profile forefront, but also the communication back is timely, it's consistent, and it's smooth, which a lot of businesses, understandably, have deadlines, they're busy, they're not sure maybe if they have even an internal person that is going to be responsible for it. So these processes can fall over. This will damage your reputation, particularly in the recruitment side.
Burn. Oh, but it is true, right? How you do one thing is how you do everything. And if you can't get back to a candidate in a recruitment process, then they can only imagine what's going on behind the scenes if they were to work in your firm, right? And I just want to touch on something you said, about accountants being busy and they've got deadlines, and that's so true. And if you've popped an ad up on Seek or something yourself, and now you've received 200 applications and 95% of those are from people overseas who don't have a work visa. And now you've got to screen all of that out. Like that's genuinely hard, right?
It is hard for
But
everyone.
the problem is everyone's in this. If you're DIYing your recruitment or if you've got internal HR, everyone's in the same boat. So everyone has to do it. And unfortunately, you can't use that as an excuse. This is part of the tough love of the conversation today. All right, so this is what visually an EVP template can look like. All right, so it's a really cool PDF format that you can utilize, like I said, if you're DIYing or using any channel to market that helps to convey you. So it gives a bit more of an essence of you and your firm beyond what you could ever communicate or convey inside, a job ad, so to speak. And I just wanted to share a personal example around having been on the receiving end of these. Many years ago, when I was in head of marketing roles in corporate environments, I was approached by recruiters. I was not looking for a job. I was not on the job market. I was not searching on Seek. I was quite happy and well paid and great role where I was. But I had a couple of recruiters reach out to me and shared with me some details about an opportunity in an EVP pack like this. And I was just blown away and so interested because I was like, wow, if they put this much work into finding someone to bring in, like imagine the vision and the leadership inside the business. And for me, salary was important, but it wasn't the main factor at that time. I actually wanted some more, I'd reached the top of where I was, and I wanted inspiring leadership. Didn't want easy leadership, don't need an easy boss, but I wanted them to have a vision. And people are crying out for leadership, and people who have a vision will always have people flock to them. It is the most magnetic thing in the world. And I have to say, I actually embarked on the recruitment process for a few of those things just to start seeing what it was like because of the approach. And so you'll find that there's not very many firms that are doing this in Australia or not doing it well. So this is something you can immediately start working on.
Yes. And
Mm.
I think it actually plays into the longer game as well. Even if you do have communication with candidates and potentially they're not the right fit, you're giving them something to take away to feel like, oh, this is a great business.
Mhm.
They've thought about me. I like what their styling is, or, visually it's appealing. And I think then that it moves more into you can start to build a pipeline as well around people that you've already had a conversation with, or even just touched even an email or anything that you've left them with, and it
Yes.
starts to build your brand profile. And in your reputation in market is so important, particularly today. It couldn't be any more important by how you treat everybody. And I think it's an extra touch, even though it can be something that is for everybody. So you don't need to personalize it to every
That's right.
single candidate. It's not going to be something that's going to take you a lot more time. But again, it's that extra piece that somebody else isn't doing that's going to give you a competitive edge.
Absolutely. And it doesn't need to take long at all because I have templates like this available for my clients. Here is an example of an edited template for a firm that they used as part of their process and had really great feedback in market. And actually, some feedback from some of the candidates almost was that the firm they it elevated the positioning of the firm in their mind, which is particularly important. Like if you're in a small areas, there's only a handful of firms, and you really like there's only a set pool of talent in an area. Um, and the other thing is that also you'll be surprised who might refer you. Even if they aren't the candidate for you. And you'll also be surprised around if you're recruiting for the slightly younger generation. Obviously, Alyce and I are very young, but the slightly younger generation, um, they talk to each other and they are a bit more open to sharing
Yes,
gossipy details of firms than the previous generation of, just the work hard, put your head down and don't complain ethos. That is not what the
absolutely.
younger generation are like at
No.
all. But on the flip side, they want to help their friend get into a good
Yes.
opportunity.
Yes, a big part, like the referral network, it doesn't have to be directly somebody that you've even engaged with. I do find that mostly if they've had a really positive interaction with your business and it is memorable, they will remember when one of their friends or colleagues or someone in market says, hey, I'm looking for this opportunity. Do you know anybody? They'll instantly go, yeah, I've got somebody, and they'll
Yes.
send the pack across, and that's how that introduction can be made. So it does really have its benefits.
And another thing you mentioned, Alyce, which we will circle back to at the end, which I love, was around building a pipeline. So sometimes it might be the right candidate, but it's just not the right time for them or the right role. But
Or
it's
the
just
right salary.
or the
There's
right
that can
salary.
be a big part too.
But it's a small industry. If you have a CRM or whatever system you use to manage contacts for your talent pipeline in a similar way that you would for clients or prospecting, you can always circle back to them later. If they've had a great experience with your firm, but it wasn't the right fit role, but they liked your firm, there might be something that comes up for them for the future, particularly if your firm's in growth mode. Or there are some firms that I speak with that are part of very large firms that you're recruiting all the time. So if you find a good team member, you'll usually try and sign and engage them, regardless of whether you have a role that's ready for them or not. We have a lot of firms because that's how tight the market is. And I understand that only bigger firms can take that as strategy, but this here you can DIY and everyone can get started on. Truly, if you were to do this, just the thinking behind it
Yes.
and will bring you forward to be powerfully answering those candidate questions in the first instance. Or you might put together something like this and go, oh, it's a bit lacking
Or
in
you,
this particular area. And
yeah.
actually, we need to do a bit of work
Yes.
on what we do for our current employees or our culture. And that's not a bad thing. There's no blame and shame. You're all super busy, but
It's a very good point because you should be actually, I know I'm going to put
It's
my
all right,
my
go for it.
HR hat on, but you should actually be looking at your benefits and your employees each 12 to 18 months. So it shouldn't just be once and done and then you look at it 5 years later. You actually have to keep up with what your competitors are doing or other people in the industry are doing to make sure that you're keeping up.
Absolutely. I agree. And if you can't retain your current team, then it's like filling a leaky bucket type of thing.
And yeah, and that's the other part too. People look at on LinkedIn how many employees have been there, how
Mm.
long tenure they've had. That is actually something
Oh,
that a
yes.
lot of people will do. So again, that part of retention is obviously high, which is not a problem for finance and accounting, let's be honest.
However, I want to just add something, which is something that, unless this has happened to you in your firm, you wouldn't be aware of, but it affects the tenure of your employees and affects the future of your firm because, like Alyce said, new candidates go and research it. So some recruiters will place someone in your firm at a salary they know is not fully competitive and they haven't told you that. And then 18 months later, they will come and pick that team member out of your firm and place them somewhere else and cherry dip across. So this is why you do need good market intelligence and to be aligned with the right people. Because I think we've got to it here. You can't recruit like it's 1999, baby.
Again, I did say to Monique, 1999. No, I'm saying you can't recruit like it's 2022. So we really have hit that window in the last 5 years. Yes, there was obviously the time before that as well, but particularly in the last 5 years, there's been a really big change in market and employees' expectations that aren't meeting, employers' expectations.
Mm.
So there is that big shift, and we're realigning what work looks like for most people. And I think it's a great thing overall, but it is a massive challenge for employees and employers.
In fact, it actually reminds me a little bit of an easy comparison would be the current property market in Brisbane and Southeast Queensland. So the change of what's happening with prices has just been escalated. Like what you thought would you could afford or work like last year, that's already increased. And
Yes.
again, there is a shortage of stock. So things are selling within just 24 hours of being on the market, like unconditional solds. You've got people coming in. If we were to use the analogy of recruitment, the equivalent of a recruiter is like a buyer's agent. So a buyer's agent represents you and goes out and finds a property and secures it before it's even on the market, typically.
It's a very good point. I think the
Yes.
biggest way that recruitment can be done when you are using a recruiter within an agency is that we have the connection to what the motivations are for someone personally and professionally.
Mm.
What you don't get when you go direct, so you're placing an ad up and you're having those conversations, you're having the potential candidate is having a conversation with either the business owner, the practice manager, someone in a senior leadership capacity, or the HR internal HR manager. What they're not going to share is a direct conversation that I can have as a recruiter around their personal circumstances, whether it's family life or what's important for them, really to make sure that they're going to get something that's going to benefit their work life and their family life or home life if you don't have kids. I think a big part to where we're seeing this moving world and the shifting environment that we do work within is that a big part of that is the personal circumstances, which it's really difficult when you're a candidate going direct into a business to have those direct line conversations. Whereas I can say to somebody, oh, okay, great. There's some great brands that do offer those, perks that you're looking for or those work environments that you're looking for. And here's who I'd recommend. So there is a big part to it that is like a buyer's agent where I do make recommendations,
Mhm.
but also on the other side, it is things like, if someone has had a bad experience, then I want to understand what that bad experience was, what contributed to that bad experience or poor experience or whatever it may be. It can be things just as easy as financial, which can be easily addressed, but it could be a certain leadership type or a structure of a business isn't isn't what this person wants. So it's very easily able for me to be able to address, okay, well, this is great. This environment over here would be much better for you long term. It's going to promote opportunities that you wouldn't get if you went into a much more, larger firm or bigger structure or anything like that. So there is an environment that you can
Yes.
have these really honest
And
conversations.
I think that means that you're going to have someone who's actually a better fit for your firm because you haven't had to stretch the truth and you've found someone for whom your firm's truth is a great match for.
Yes.
And another thing you shared is around personal well-being and things. So, travel times, huge consideration for people like where your firm's located. Some of the things you might think might be a disadvantage that you're out in the suburbs compared to a hotspot area might be an advantage
Huge attraction.
to the right person who can just have a quick 10-minute drive to work and do school pickup or drop off
Yes.
or whatever. So don't discount some of the things that maybe you don't see as strengths are. And I think this is where it helps to have a third party reflection come and help drill into that because like people like Alyce know what candidates are thinking and looking for.
Yes, and it allows us as well to be able to promote smaller businesses that don't
Mm.
have the brand profile of the larger firms. So it allows us in conversation to say, oh, actually, when someone says, oh, this is what I'm after, and I say that actually exists, and they think, what? No, it doesn't.
Yes.
And then I talk through some of the firms that would be able to offer that they would have never engaged or seen online or been, communicated about if it hadn't have been for the relationship that we hold.
I love it. So it's having someone represent your firm's best interests, and boutique recruiters like Alyce work for both parties' best interests, candidate and firm, because that's what creates long-term retention and pipeline, right? And then I just wanted to showcase like the opposite of that approach, right? So the opposite of a boutique approach that highlights the strengths and advocates for you is just the opposite to that is just slapping up a generic ad on Seek or an industry platform. And to be honest, firms doing this themselves are guilty of this, but there's really bad recruiters out there in the market who also do a really terrible job of this as well. So take a look at some of these descriptions. It's just really around tasks and the role. And people aren't robots. People, although they will need to have certain role requirements and skills, obviously, to be a match for the role, but that's not really the selling point of the role. They get that they're going to be doing those tasks.
Yes.
So it's
This is where a lot of businesses come undone, understandably, because it's not something they do every day, obviously. It's only when they need a new hire for the team, and it could just be 2 to 3 hires a year or even one hire every 5 years. So it's like it's not your fault if you're not really sure how to summarize or write a job ad, but every business across every industry is guilty of it. The unfortunate thing is that people won't actually even like click onto your job ad if it is just a generic ad around what the role responsibilities are. A big part of my career and even running Level Up the last 7 years, we don't advertise our roles through Seek or LinkedIn or put a job ad up because we don't want to do the same thing that a business has already done. So for us, we're taking away the role responsibilities and the job titles and all of those things that everyone else feels you need to have to communicate to attract somebody. And we'll have conversations with people to understand what is it that they're looking for? Does title even matter? Because sometimes it isn't about the title, it's about the environment that they're stepping into, the job security that they'll have, the leadership team that they'll get to be able to work within. All of those things matter versus an actual description around what your job is. Who are the people like to work with? What's their background story? Because everyone has a story. And a lot of, if it's a smaller to medium sized business, those leaders will have a similar story coming out of a larger firm that
yes.
you can relate to. And here's what we didn't like, so here's how we're doing it differently.
I love it. That's so true. And on that topic, we could probably run a day workshop
How
on
much
this,
time do we
but
have?
what are some of the key recruitment mistakes that you see either firms doing individually or if they're working with, perhaps not a top tier recruiter?
Yes.
And by the way, the recruitment fees that you pay does not necessarily have any correlation to the level of service or outcomes you might receive. So this is the first heads up.
Yes. The reality is, no matter the size of your firm, you can always attract if you have the right strategies and the right process and all of the talent attraction strategies that I can share with you in place. Where I always see those mistakes come through is potentially missing out on people due to salary. So you're gonna list a salary that understandably is where market sits from what the data is that you'll be getting off Seek, Indeed, and all of those job sites. The reality is, though, in this competitive market, you're never going to get somebody for that salary typically because they're going to want something to make a step out. And so they're going to view that job ad and they're not going to apply because it's already underneath what they're looking to earn. So it is little things like this that can create smaller and bigger problems for businesses. Job ads, obviously, how you summarize what the role is. Sometimes the unicorn that doesn't exist, which everyone will even write in a job ad, we're looking for a unicorn or we're looking for this, or the way that you summarize things really does have an impact to a candidate. But there are many other things too. If you don't share around your internal success stories, how you've been able to promote people internally, some of the differences that you do provide versus other agencies or even just other, businesses in general. So flexibility, I know I keep honing into this, but your work-life balance, all of those things will play a part in summarizing. You want to be fun. You need to have some color to you. You can't just be black and white, which a lot of accountants, and I know that you're all sitting here cringing, I get it. But it is good to have a little bit of personality, and that can just come from your leadership team in LinkedIn, for example. I know not everyone is across these platforms, and it can be really confronting for many. But even just starting there and building up your own personal brand profile will be able to attract more people to your business.
I love it. And on that point, Alyce,
Oh,
social media is your firm's secret weapon. So basically, your firm has a brand, whether you realize it or not. And it's the same with for clients, right? Even referrals. People are going to go check you out online and see your vibes. So is your brand online telling the story you want it to tell? Or are people leaping to perhaps the wrong conclusion if there's no posts, for the last 5 years, or they can't see who you are? It's just very generic content. So candidates are really looking at your firm's social media, your firm's branding, your website, as Alyce mentioned, partner profiles, and they'll typically head to LinkedIn for that, as well as what's on your website. You've got an EVP and obviously job ads. And I think the key thing to understand when it comes to any marketing, and it's all part of the dark arts that accountants, so it's all a mystery to you, is that unlike numbers where it's black and white, 1 + 1 = 2, there's a right answer and a wrong answer. That's not the case when it comes to marketing. It's all about perception. And if you understand this, you can use it to your advantage to help shape a reality in market, as opposed to people creating the wrong perception and judging what might be the best book in your area, so the best firm to work at, but if it's got a terrible cover, that's what people are thinking. And having a great cover doesn't mean it needs to be expensive, right? There's lots of little hacks for this. Here's an example of a firm in Brisbane with some of their social media showcasing some of the fun stuff their team's doing. They have a really, really great, vibrant culture, showcasing their team, what they're up to, strategic partnerships, market events. And by the way, they are in mega growth mode and have recruited, I think, about 8 team over the last maybe 8 months or 10 months. But for the size of their firm, that's a very big growth percentage. And Alyce mentioned something while we were preparing for this that I thought was really interesting, and around not just showing your team, but also showing the opportunities for your team and progression. I don't know if you want to speak to that a little bit. I thought that was really fascinating.
I think a big part of having long-term retention is to ensure that you are talking through what the opportunities could present for somebody stepping in. And there are many ways to do that. I think that typically what businesses have done is talk about their internal culture and, their brand perception on the outside, but internally, there are little things that you can do to build up your awareness. So for someone on the outside, it could be things like celebrating staff anniversaries. It could be promoting how somebody got into a certain promotion, as an example, the clientele that you work with, why you love working with them. All of those things really promote, as you're aware, coming out of what you promote too, it really does stand out to a candidate looking in.
Yes, and particularly if you are investing in team to attend cool trainings, go to things like ZeroCon or help them across some of their certifications or industry association memberships or CPA or anything, or even if you are helping to upskill and train junior graduates in your firm, this is really interesting to team members looking on the outside in because that's proof of what you're saying you do.
And I think a big part of this too stems into you have to get out in real life and you need to also network to build your own profile. And that can be very time consuming, and that's probably what restricts a lot of businesses by doing it. But even if you commit to 1 to 2 a year, it really helps the network that you have and people remembering, oh, yes, I do know a great firm. They are looking for somebody. And so this in itself will help you with your talent attraction, your engagement strategies going forward over the next couple of years.
Absolutely. And I have a number of firms that I've been helping to build out a talent pipeline by having the director engage in specific industry events and certain things and start proactively connecting with talent long before they'll be ready to hire them because that will help fuel the growth of their firm. And they're like all across all the things
Yes.
that we
Yeah.
say. So, and that's who you're competing with in the market, by the way. So don't rest on the laurels there. Here's an example of using your EVP pack in a slightly different format on a careers page on your website. That's a great, easy platform to update. One of the most trafficked areas, certainly something that all candidates go and look at. And you can use that to highlight what's in it for them.
The unique part of maybe all of your team do marathons together. That's very generic, but it's an easy example of,
Spreadsheet marathon.
yeah.
Sorry, I did.
Just highlighting, what you do as a business together and the healthy things that you can do.
Yes.
Some of the best clients that I work with, they hike Mount Kosciuszko and do charity and do all of those
Wow.
things, or they'll be into biking, or there's something that they're actively involved with as well. I think those parts,
Charity days
yes,
and
they
giving
really
bit
stand
of
out.
love, being involved in stuff that gives back. And remember that burnout. So obviously capacity is, one of the number one issues facing the industry. But right on the back of that is burnout because of the capacity. Okay. So
Yes.
showcasing the ways that you embrace mental wellness and health and not actively burning out your current team is a great way to be attractive to new
Yes.
team. All right, so some quick insights that you can put into action. So share a few meet the team posts on your social media. If you're already doing that, take it to the next level with really interesting nuances or share stories about the progress and development of team within your firm. Create a careers page on your website. If you have tech issues, you could even do this as an evergreen blog post. That's a very easy format that you can link to and start the journey of bringing your LinkedIn profiles up to date. If your photo is 10 years old on LinkedIn, it's time for a new one. And ideally, one from this year.
And just being active. You don't have to post, if
Mm,
it's the first time and you haven't done a post, and you're really starting to have to get into that understanding around taking away the nerves of having to do that if you are, a smaller agency or firm. But I think that you can do little things like sharing content of other industry
yes.
leaders, little things like that.
Thought-provoking thing. There's
Thoughts,
always so much stuff
whatever
going on in the
aligns to your
industry.
business, whatever aligns to your method of, what you do, that will obviously attract the right kind of people to your team as well.
Yes, I love it. All right, so attracting is one part of the equation. Obviously, keeping them is the other. And the happier your people are internally, also the easier it is to attract new people. So I know that again, that another topic that you're passionate about, and where almost the recruitment journey shouldn't end at the signing of a contract. Actually, it's just the beginning. It's
Yeah.
setting the scene for success. So
Yes.
share a little bit about that for us.
Absolutely. Again, a candidate needs to feel loved and welcomed and seen, heard, all of those things when they step into a business. And it can sometimes fall, well, oftentimes it falls over on the wayside due to deadlines, shortfalls in the team, people are off, and then everything gets lumped onto this new person, and it's never a great onboarding. So you want to make sure that as business owners, the leaders, the managers, the practice managers, whoever it may be that you can lean on, are present and actually in real life with these people for the
Yes.
first 3 to 6 months as a minimum to make sure that they are getting what they need to feel supported. Following that, you want to have regular check-ins every quarter to make sure, and I'm not talking about like work check-ins. You want to have an actual lunch, take them out for a coffee or a dinner or whatever may suit, your working environment, to just check in on a personal level to see, are they happy? Are they fulfilled? Are they feeling psychologically safe? Because a big part that we all forget is when you get busy and then those deadlines and the busy periods come, you forget that these people are still trying to integrate into new teams, new personalities, new clients, all of those challenges that go along with it. And your role really only does start once they step into the business. It's not just, here you go, here's your seat, and off you run.
Yes, and I really love what you said about leaning in and taking them for a coffee or something like that. I know it's hard when you're so busy and that's not billable time, right? That I started at a biggish sort of business. It was a big leap for me. And on my first day, the CEO took me out for a one-on-one lunch because I was in a quite an important role, but still I was not expecting that. I was really surprised. And it helped cement a relationship of trust. We didn't spend a huge amount of time together after that because it's obviously very, very busy. But I felt so special and I was really surprised, and it had me feel very safe at the company. Um, and then on the flip side, when I've managed big teams, I've always taken my individual team members out for a coffee once a quarter,
Yeah.
not to chat about work, it was actually to chat about their goals and what I could do as their leader to help support those, right? Because my philosophy is it shouldn't come as a surprise to you if someone quits. I know that's a bit of a truth bomb, but if you have been engaging with them personally, you know what's important to them, which might be very different to someone else in the exact same adjacent role to them because they're different people. And you can show them or demonstrate with your actions and with your development with them that you hear them, it's important, and that there are things in play. Or it might just be small things like they just want to finish early on a Thursday so they can go watch a soccer game. Like if you know what's on their heart, that will help you retain. And I'm going to share a story in a moment, but if you want
Yeah,
to leap in on that.
I think as a bare minimum, this isn't just for new employees. This should be if it
Oh, yes,
for
for
any
everyone.
person in your business to make sure that long-term retention is there. Even if you get busy and, we're all guilty of it, you should absolutely check in with, your people every 3 months as a minimum. And that is outside the office, away from those walls, where you have that coffee catch up or that lunch or that dinner or whatever it may be. As a bare minimum, you should always be doing that so that they do feel the same way that Mon just shared she felt. It is a bare minimum, honestly, that I could, if
Yes.
my key takeaway, even just for that, for your team right now, if you're not doing that, that is something you can implement very quickly and it's not expensive.
That's right. And you're accountant, so it could just be a coffee, right? But for a new starter, it could even be a team lunch out of the office in the first week, right? Or ideally on the first day. So it's immediately showing that that team member is special and important and helping to facilitate connection.
Yes.
Now, what I was sharing before about ideally, you should have an inclination if someone is no longer a fit for the role, or you can no longer, and sometimes this happens, right? It's unavoidable that your firm no longer, has a future that team member wants, in which case you can still help them in other ways and part as friends, so to speak. But there's a concept from Flight Centre, which is called brightness of future. Now, pre-COVID, changed a little bit after COVID, but pre-COVID, Flight Centre were renowned for having some of the best retention for that industry type and a really cool booming culture. Now, one of the things that they implemented across their management teams was this concept called brightness of future. It means that each manager managing their team should know what brightness of future looks like for their team members. And again, that's going to be very different. If we go back to the one of the first slides in this presentation where we looked at like senior Sally versus ambitious Amanda versus steady Sam, brightness of future might look very different for them. So let me give you an example. Brightness of future for someone quite ambitious might include, after a certain period, a review, a job title upgrade, potentially, a review around salary, and something kind of showy or big ticket, like attending an industry conference or an event if they've hit certain KPIs. For Steady Sam, it might just be that it means the world to him if his wife can count on him to be home for dinner 2 designated nights of the week, regardless of the schedule. And that, there's a slow but steady career progression path that feels safe for him. It really doesn't matter, but it's about finding out what that might look for that person and then seeing what small things you can do under your leadership remit to help that person feel like that's possible for them. Because it's not about promising crazy things, it's actually just about two-way communication. Because here's an example from a partner that I met about 3 months ago, who shared that he was looking to exit his business. He'd spent years and years and years, like 15 years, cultivating this other person who was, within his firm. That was his legacy. He was, they were going to transition and all that sort of stuff. And then what happened was that person actually came in one day and told him that he'd taken an offer somewhere else because he'd been offered a partner and buy-in for that firm and he couldn't wait any longer at this firm. And because that partner had never communicated the vision or the brightness of future to that team, it just kind of assumed, and everyone's so busy doing the work. But communication is key. So it's not about crazy promises or the biggest, shiniest thing. It's just communication and having people feel that they can communicate potentially, what would be amazing for them. And the real winners, so the high performers, want to make sure that they give something and meet targets in order to get that, right?
Yes.
So, and if you don't, you'll find high performers will leave because they want to work in a high performance environment where high performance is rewarded.
100%.
Mic drop moment there. And it's very true. And so people, purpose, profit, it's just about making your firm a place that people want to work in. It's not always easy, right? If you're slammed and busy, sometimes you need third-party support. So leadership training, off-site days, people like Alyce who do advisory, like talent advisory. So to help you as part of your ongoing talent development within your firm, even after they've been recruited.
Yes, and that's different to recruitment. It's teaching you and helping you in what we can set up as a process for you ongoing so that you don't need us every time.
Yes. And also someone who can tell you what needs to be said because your team won't. Most of them are accounting style personalities and profiles, so they're not confrontational, and they're often, if you've got good team, they're usually not complainers. They will just get on, but it doesn't mean that the burden's not sinking in or there's not like a little bit of resentment or even just that they're losing hope.
Yes.
Right. So having third party structure, I find when I've been in-house in roles, that's always been a game changer. We've always loved it and it's always had an amazing investment. Because here's some bonus insights for you. If you have a strong talent strategy in place, you're being supported by an amazing recruiter, you've got attraction material out in market, you can be a lot more confident in your ability to onboard new team members into your team, which means you can much more confidently offboard team members that are no longer aligned, that are dragging down your team culture and making it a place that ideal candidates don't want to work. Now, this can really happen a lot in the accounting industry because of the long tenure. You've got people who have been in there for a long time, they're change resistant, they're not helping with any improvements and creating a bit of a negative culture. great people don't want to work there. And if you have a new amazing whiz bang candidate come on, it started a ticking time bomb for how long they want to stay because they're like, I just don't want to be around. I can't work in this. So I joke about it, but it's actually true. And I've worked with a number of accounting firms who, for whatever reasons, released some D players back into the wild. And I have never seen them happier in my whole life. Their fees haven't really changed. A lot of the other circumstances, they're still working, hours and all that, but it's made for a better environment. And strong recruitment strategies help relieve stress. So we talk about capacity and burnout. So then your biggest risk half the time with your team is a lack of capacity because you don't have enough team and you haven't put in the hard yards to secure the right team, then negatively impacts everyone on your team, increases their stress, fast tracks their burnout, and then has people either fall off or worst case, they actually just stay in your firm, but now they are burnt out and underperforming, and really not through their own fault either. They might have been A players. So this is why I'm so passionate about this topic. I wanted to have Alyce come on today and share some of these insights with you because it's a game changer. It's the real game changer for your firm. As much as I'm passionate about marketing, if you don't have anyone to deliver the work or make the magic happen behind the scenes, nada. So instead of treating talent and recruitment as an off-on strategy, you just think about it when someone leaves or you need a new team member. We encourage an always-on sort of mentality around building a talent pipeline. And I do the same with marketing, right? It's always on.
Mm-hmm.
That wheel of momentum makes everything so much easier than like foot on the gas, off the gas, on the gas, off the gas, right? And some of the things you mentioned about building your network and connections and having things in play before you need them, so important. So do you want to share a few examples where you've seen this work really well, or maybe what trips people up?
Yeah, I think honestly, a big part of meeting in real life, or even just going to one or two events each year, which I know a lot of you would already do, but a big part to it is you don't know who you're even going to get introduced to. And mostly it's you'll have a couple of conversations and you'll meet some great people and you have some great stories and you'll add each other on the network. And then that network, you will then start liking each other's posts and you're, starting to build this back and forth, which then builds your own brand presence and continues to build theirs. So it can be little minimal things like that. But in reality, if you have met somebody and they like you, they are going to share when you're advertising or when they see that you've
Yes.
mentioned something online that, we're looking for an accountant, or we're looking for a practice manager, or
Mm.
whoever it may be. That then is somebody who is also going to be sharing your story of you searching. So it is just really small things that can make a really big difference.
Yes. And if you can't do that personally for whatever reason, that's when you need your recruiter doing that for you.
I think ultimately you don't have access to everybody in market, but when you have somebody present some other people, you don't even have to meet them. You only have to meet people that you're looking to, maybe potentially be interested in or would never have considered their profile before. Then that's when you actually have those introductions. But I think mostly what people benefit from is the connections to people outside of their own network
Mm.
from placing a job ad that they get access to.
And we can certainly say, this happens all the time in every other industry. I help, other colleagues and people I know when they are looking for roles. I'm like, oh, I know this person, I this, but
Yeah.
I will only do that if they've, got all those things we talked about here sorted. All right, so we have flown through this. I know we are short on time, just a little bit over time, so we've probably run out of time for Q&A. But the good news is we can book a Q&A to chat about all things recruitment after this session. You'll also receive on email day after this session tomorrow if you're watching this live, or perhaps on demand if you're watching the replay, a checklist. So some of the things that Alyce shared, that basically, when people or businesses or firms come to her for help with recruitment, is a little bit of a checklist for what's going to make the process a lot easier and more successful. She works her magic, but obviously there's things that will really help at your end. And even if you want to just DIY and market, that's exactly the same checklist you'll have.
And I was going to say, I just wanted to finish too with it is really hard right
Mm.
now. So I think a lot of people and a lot of businesses are like, why can't I find anybody and why are we struggling so much? It isn't personal. It is just the market that we're faced with.
And correct me if I'm wrong, but before this, I think you said like in you've been, a recruiter for 15 years or around that
Mhm.
mark here, and this is one of the toughest markets you've seen.
Yes, in the last 5 years, it's never been
Oh
harder.
yeah.
Yeah.
Wow. And we thought it was hard in that post-COVID boom, right?
Across every industry, everyone is feeling the pinch and everyone is
Oh.
struggling, and it really is taking a lot of difference and a lot of creative,
Mhm.
I guess, suggestions around what you can offer and how you can look. There's a lot of negotiations around, meeting in the middle with some things
Mm.
that potentially a candidate's looking for, and you haven't thought that way before. These conversations, it's all to be able to benefit, maybe looking at things a little bit differently to be able to get the people in the door.
Yes, and you said something that we were talking about the other day in regards to recruitment. If you have someone in the middle facilitating those conversations, it can be a really open conversation, and a
Yes,
lot of things can be explored and discussed that you would never if you were just offering a role with your conditions directly to a candidate.
yes,
And I think in the same way that, buyers and sellers agents can be that intermediary, that's when it really helps because it often the recruiter, like you were saying, might know something that's quite important to that candidate and it's
yes.
not really a big deal for you, so you can easily acquiesce on that particular point or bring something up. Um, so thank you. We hope you've gained a few insights during this webinar. We didn't want to sugarcoat it, like Alyce said, like it is tough right now. It is really tough. And here's the thing, you are going to be having to recruit team members for your firm, either away from another firm or away from the talent pool of another firm, right? There are not enough accountants in Australia and New Zealand to go around. That's actually a fact. So, therefore, if you aren't doing some of these things we talked about, you're at a significant disadvantage. If you are doing all of the things that we talked about in this webinar, well, first of all, good on you. And then secondly, you just need to have the right intermediary or recruiter and market to make sure that that's connecting with the right people beyond your pool. So we hope that there's been a few takeaways and insights. Alyce, is there anything you wanted to round out with?
Yeah, I think, yes, it's a difficult market, but you can still get success. That's a big
Mm.
part to it. And I think a number of businesses, can be selling the dream and, doing all the things right that you would particularly think. But long term, ultimately, it comes down to what that individual candidate is looking for. And it's those individual conversations that will get a lot more traction a lot quicker. And I think that ultimately just having conversations is going to open up your mind into what your EVP is, but also what the longer term vision and plans and how you're communicating that internally as well as externally. It's actually a really, really good process, regardless of the size of business that you are.
Yes, that's such a great point. All right. Well, thank you so much for spending your time with us. You will receive a link following this if you'd like to book in for a chat to review your current talent strategy, what the opportunities are, and perhaps what might need to be in place for particular roles. And we'll have a calendar link coming through for you then. So until then, enjoy the rest of your day and cheers.
Bye.